everybody, it's Ryan. Now, as promised, I'm going to discuss how the crops did this year on my 11-acre cornfield and my 35-acre bean field. Now, if you guys haven't seen the video, I recommend going back to the video that we had done earlier this year that had discussed our outlook, what we were expecting to make on these two fields, and how grim my outlook was when we went to go get my operating loan from FSA. So, I do run more than what I'm going to be discussing here. I've actually ran about 5 times this year, so just keep in mind that these are not my only 2 fields. I'm going to be trying to be more inclusive with the acres and getting you guys in on all the fields and talking about like all the management decisions and all that fun stuff this coming year. But since I only started off talking about the finances on these 2 fields, I decided just to stick with using these 2, even though we did have some issues with the corn on one of my fields that I know a lot of you are curious about, but I'm going to get to that in a little bit. So anyway, let's start on corn. As you know, I have my 11-acre cornfield that has been in continuous corn for 4 or 5 years now. And it did about 190 bushels to the acre this year. And that's about 5 bushels to the acre more than it was last year. However, that's not quite the amount of marginal increase that I was looking for this year, because compared to our other fields, this is actually not quite that good. A lot of our fields yielded well over 200. Our total average was over 200, and our highest farm yielded 240, 250, somewhere up in there. So keep in mind that this is pretty good, but it's not quite as good as what I was hoping for. Earlier this year, we had used a number of 175 bushels to the acre because you never know what you're going to get when you're going into the year. FSA makes you use about 175 bushels to the acre just because if you don't have a crop history, they don't really have anything to go off of, so they just use that. And when I'm going to purchase, or actually pre-sell my corn by calling up the grain elevator and booking a certain price, I use that kind of as a base to only sell a certain percentage up to that. So we had total of about 2,100 bushels of corn off of that 11 acres, and that's pretty good. It was more than last year, and I have it somewhere. When we were expecting about 350 in terms of price earlier in the spring, which that is what it was when I had made the video. I used $3.33 to the bushel because we figured in trucking. I also did that for the beans as well. So $3.33, and that left us with about $6,410 of corn that we had gotten there. So what the actual turned out to be was $8,715. That's about $2,000 more than what we were expecting. And not only is that because of the increase in bushels that we had seen, but it's also because of the marketing that I had done. This is actually part of what saved me this year on what was going to be a disaster with the field that failed. I'll get back to that. But I had marketed my corn well over $4. Current day price, I think it's somewhere sitting around $3.65. But here we got about $3.33 is what we were figuring. During harvest, corn price actually dipped down below that, and I think it might have seen below $3 for a couple days in our area. But like I said, luckily I had actually booked a little too much corn in my opinion. I was sitting there sweating a while when that cornfield of mine wasn't yielding quite as we were expecting, because I was really sweating, worrying that I wouldn't have enough corn to cover what I had sold. Is it really that big a deal? Because I had a really good buffer there in terms of price. Not really that big of something to sweat over, but it's something that I worry about. So anyway, I ended up with about $8,715 worth of corn, and when I'd been expecting $6,400. Now looking over at my beans were freaking awesome this year. On this particular field, the average the average bushels to the acre was 74.5. That is crazy to me, because when we had originally been figuring this, we used 45 bushels to the acre, and that is that creates quite a big rift when you figure in how many acres there were, 35 acres, and then you multiply it by the difference that we had seen, which was about, what is that, 30 bushels. So 30 times 30, 900 bushels of beans times $10. So that's about $9,000 difference that we have there. On this field, we were expecting 45 bushels to the acre at $8.64. That is figuring in trucking. Without trucking, we were figuring about $8.81. And the total profit that I was expecting to see off the beans was $12,815.55. Combined, we were expecting to make about $19,225 with expenses of $22,447, and that left us in the red by about $3,500, I believe. And you know, we were looking at a pretty grim outlook, but these are the things that you have to look at and say, okay, if this year isn't quite a spectacular year, you get 175 like we were figuring, and I didn't do so well on the marketing, and I had gotten the harvesting price, which was right around that 333 or 333 range. You know, I would have been looking at that for corn. It's not a big deal here because, you know, it's only 11 acres, but I run about half and half, and it would have made a larger difference if we use all of my fields. So with that, the marketing, like I said, was huge. Once it hit $4, I was just selling everything, and I think Mom and Travis and Dad were trying to snatch the phone away from me, because it's just like, I can't stop selling, because, I mean, that was a pretty good price. And, you know, going into it, you think, you know, price could go up to $5 or $7 again, but what are really the chances of that happening? Not really quite as high as you'd like to think. I'm a realist. I look at situations as they are. I had used the last 3 years. I looked at what the prices had done on a trend. I figured, okay, you know, I can make a profit at $4. This is where I'm going to start selling, and that's what I did. So it really helped me in the long run, even with the field that I'm not including here that had failed. But same thing with the beans. We were looking at 45 bushels to the acre. I did have some fields that did 45 bushels to the acre of beans. Those were my worst fields. I believe there were about 30 acres that did 45 bushels to the acre. But I had also 2 other farms that did well over 70, and they made a huge difference. So with that, our actuals were $8,700 worth of corn and $24,794 worth of beans. Just on the beans, I covered what the expenses were on the corn. I could have had a complete failure on the corn this year. On this field, just looking at these two, I could have had a complete failure here, and this bean field would have completely covered for the corn, and I still would have made a profit. So I didn't do quite as well on the marketing for the beans. The beans did a weird trend this year. I also got screwed on something else for price marketing by someone else, and we didn't do so hot there. I actually got paid, what was it, like $7.50 for 2 loads of beans, and when I saw it, I kind of freaked out. But then again, it is only 2 loads. I believe I lost, what is that, $2,000, $4,000, just doing that. So I wasn't crazy about it when we did that. I actually didn't even sign up for it at first, but things happened, and I just decided to stick with it rather than canceling it, and I got burned on it. But you know, lessons learned. Anyway, like I've said, our expected was $19,225, and my actual profit on these two fields was $33,509. I can't really say that's profit, that's kind of like income. After expenses, that's $11,000 just on these two fields. So, did I do well this year? Yes. A lot of you guys are wondering, you know, why am I looking at buying a tractor? Why am I looking at buying a truck? Why am I looking at buying a skid steer when one of my fields had failed? Like I said, I'll get back to that in like a minute. But looking at this, overall, I did pretty darn well. Now, like I was saying with the fields that had failed, I had, what was it, around about 100 acres of my corn. There was an application issue where the co-op hadn't spread the fertilizer properly, and I got burned there. So what it was doing was it was spreading heavily in certain spots, and it wasn't spreading the fertilizer at all in other places. So what we had were streaking in the fields, and I had actually taken the drone out. Two things saved me this year: the drone, as well as the yield monitor that we got from Andrew at WS. That yield monitor paid itself off in the first year. I had actually taken the drone up early in July, and maybe it was actually in June, and I took it up, looked at the field, and I'm like, okay, this doesn't look good. I asked what it was, and they're like, yeah, that's probably what it was. So I had a text confirmation that, okay, it was because of the fertilizer application. Anyway, when fall came around, they hadn't done anything about it, and why, I don't know, I'm not going to get into it, because they made it right. Come in the fall, we started pulling into the field with the yield monitor, and really it's just by happenstance that we had the yield monitor on the combine. But we pulled into the field, and my heart just dropped. We were seeing yields in there down in the like 70 bushels to the acre of corn in some places, and I was looking up and I was figuring what I was going to make, and I was panicking. And this was before we had harvested all the beans. This is actually my second cornfield that we started harvesting, so I had no idea how things were going to pan out. I was freaking out. And I made it clear in my videos there on what I said. You know, I had corn ears that were about this long, and the reason for that being is because in some spots the yield was 70 bushels to the acre, and then where the fertilizer was applied really heavily, I was seeing upwards of 300 bushels to the acre in some spots. But the average low sat around, I believe, 120, and the average high sat around 130, 140. And they figured in that if the fertilizer had actually been there across the field, I would have seen about 210, maybe slightly higher than that, bushels to the acre. All in all, my average in that field, those two fields were just under 160, I believe. But like I said, that's all in the yield monitor data that I have on the iPad, because luckily I can pull the yield monitor data up just on my iPad. I'll probably talk about that more this coming year as we go and look at our fields. So like I said, that yield monitor saved me because they did make it right. You know, they came out and they did a yield check in different spots, and they paid everything off and they fixed it. So I can't really complain about it. Everybody makes mistakes. I'm not gonna sit and, you know, degrade them and talk about them like that. So all in all, I did pretty well compared to what I was expecting. Corn and bean prices now, I believe beans sit around $9.65, and corn is sitting around $3.60. I'm not sure if that's for today or if that's for November, but I'm going to be using that information when I go through and do my input video for this year, talking about what my outlook is expected to be. If the crops don't yield quite like I hope, here's what it's going to look like. We're just going to keep using the base. As far as I'm concerned, I'd rather figure low than figure high. So with that, I'm going to let you guys go. I hope you found this video a little informational. I hope I explained a little bit how things turned out as far as the field that had failed in terms of fertilizer applications and stuff like that, and why I was worried about things. So things did turn out for better. I'm going to be going and looking at our outlook for this year. Will it look as gloom and doom as it did last year? I do not think so, because prices are a little higher than they were this time last year, and I have a lot of confidence in this coming year. So, I hope you guys enjoyed this video. Be sure to check out all of our other ones. Again, if you haven't seen the previous video to this, I encourage you to go check it out. I'm going to be featuring more videos, or more of my fields in this year's input video. So thanks for watching, guys. Be sure to check out all of our other videos. Be sure to like, comment, subscribe. Be sure to check us out on Facebook, Instagram, Twitter, and Snapchat. All how farms work. And I'll see you next time.